Hello, I'm Gordon Robertson, and welcome to 700 Club Israel. This show is a celebration of the rich history and culture of the Holy Land. We'll bring you news, features, human interest stories from Israel. And through all the volatile changes in the Middle East, our bureau chief, Chris Mitchell, is on the ground with the latest headlines.
During its war with Israel, Iran fired nearly 500 ballistic missiles at the Jewish state.
Just hours after the U.S. hit the nuclear sites at Natanz, Fordo, and Isfahan, this was the answer of the Islamic regime, a barrage of about 25 missiles.
For more than 2 decades, CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell has led the CBN News Bureau in Jerusalem, delivering trusted, on-the-ground reporting from Israel, bringing viewers the stories that matter, along with the biblical and historical context of the news.
I'm here in San Remo, Italy, at the very spot where world leaders redrew the map of the Middle East.
The world is increasingly turning its attention to Israel and the Middle East, a region where prophecy, politics, and conflict converge. It's where history meets the headlines. And it's why Chris and this team strive to deliver timely, accurate, and truthful reports so CBN viewers can understand the times. Paul Strand, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, our watchman on the wall, Chris Mitchell, is here with us in the studio. Chris, it's always a great pleasure. You always bring the spiritual side of the stories to Israel, and that's what I want to start off with. This week's Torah portion, the parashah, is all about Balaam and the donkey, and trying to curse Israel, and in that not finding it. But there's a passage that Benjamin Netanyahu used in order to launch the strikes in Iran. And it comes from Numbers chapter 22. It now must be said of Jacob and of Israel, oh, what God has done. Look, a people rises like a lioness and lifts itself up like a lion. And that was the battle cry, if you will, on this. And all of the Middle East seems to have changed.
Totally.
In just a very short period of time, what famously is now being called the 12-Day War. What's your view that this is this week's Torah portion? As he's here in Washington, D.C., he's meeting with our president to talk about, what's the final plan for Gaza? What's the final plan for Hezbollah? What's your take on the significance of this being now the Torah portion?
Yeah, well, this was called Operation Rising Lion, based on the Numbers scripture that he cited. I think we're going through tumultuous, historic, and biblical changes right now in the whole Middle East. If you look back to October 7th, the worst day in Israel's history since the Holocaust, and here we are about a year and a half later, we are seeing, I think, not only a geopolitical shift, but a biblical shift of all the nations in the region. You look at Syria, Lebanon, they're going through tumultuous changes. Are we on the cusp of a new expanded Abraham Accords with Saudi Arabia coming in? Is this the peace that some people look to preceding the Ezekiel 37-38 war? That's what many people is asking that question. So we are living in tumultuous times. And to your point, you really can't understand the Middle East until you look at it from a biblical perspective. And when you talk about the parashah portion, so many times that portion of the week just equates to what's happening geopolitically in the region.
Well, let's look at that Ezekiel prophecy, because I think in the whole, since October 7th, people have been looking at that as well as other prophecies that are really kind of alarming as to people are going to invade Jerusalem, and just all the barbaric things that happened on October 7th are listed in that prophecy for Jerusalem. But in my view of it, well, Israel's never been at peace in its entire history. There's always been a declaration of war that has stood against them since 1948. So are we going to see that? And is peace now breaking out in the Middle East?
Well, some people think so. If the Abraham Accords are expanded, like many people think they are, and just have a season of peace. I mean, that doesn't mean every nation in the region, including Iran, and whether or not that will see a regime change as well, but it's a relative time of peace. And could that happen in our lifetime, and could that proceed, as we talked about Ezekiel, and maybe prophecies in Daniel as well?
Well, the underlying ideology, I don't think has changed.
Right.
And so the ideology of the Houthis, the ideology of the Ayatollah, the ideology of Hezbollah, what prompted Hamas, just look at the flag of the Houthis. You know, it's, let's praise Allah, but it's death to America, death to Israel, kill Jews.
Right.
That's all on their flag, and they really mean it. This is not, they think they're serving God.
They do.
By killing Jews.
Yeah. The same thing with Hamas. You kind of wonder, after so much punishment that they've taken militarily, that they're still fighting. And it's just this ideology that goes to death, where they feel when they die, they're a shaheed, martyr, they're going straight to heaven, and maybe 72 virgins. But this is an ideology that's fanatical, that's so deeply rooted, that has the Houthis, has Hamas, even Hezbollah continuing the fight against Israel.
I don't think many Westerns really understand that.
No.
That these fighters think their very soul depends on them staying in the fight.
Yeah, and I think that's one theme we have tried ever since the beginning of the Bureau back in 2000, to educate Western people that we're not looking at a Western region. We're looking at a Middle East thought and culture. And somebody described it sort of like going to the Middle East bazaar. And when you're in the bazaar, as a Westerner, you really need to know you're not in Kansas anymore.
Yeah, and it's a completely different framework of thinking. They're not thinking about necessarily a better life for their children and grandchildren. They're thinking, how can I die a martyr? And how can my children die as martyrs? That's their greatest goal.
Yeah, and I was talking to a friend of mine the other day from Israel, and he was saying, the Oslo Accords were sort of based on a Western construct. No, this is what, land for peace. We can do this. We can barter this. But no, this is not the kind of thinking that many people had, and they're in the Middle East.
Yeah, and if you do come to peace with Israel, the next step for the fundamental Muslim community is to kill you.
Yes, exactly.
So everyone knows that too.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about you.
Okay.
So how does somebody from Boston end up in Jerusalem? How did that happen?
It was a calling, and it was something when I was here in 1996, my first trip to Israel was with CBN, and I went to CBN, fell in love with the land and the people, not knowing that 4 years later, myself, my wife, and 3 children would be there. Next was the next time I came there, I went to a meeting with Derek Prince. And the only thing I remember from that meeting was he was getting out of the British Army in 1948, and he was telling an elderly Jewish woman he wanted to live in Jerusalem. And she says, Derek, you don't choose Jerusalem. Jerusalem chooses you. And literally it pierced my heart. And I thought, Lord, are you choosing us for Jerusalem? And then I came back the next time, 1998, and that was just after Mike Patrick then put out an email asking for volunteers to move to Jerusalem and start a bureau. And I happened to be the only one to volunteer. But during that time, I really felt Holy Spirit put on my heart to put Philip, Kathleen, and Grace, my 3 children, on the altar in a spiritual sense like Abraham did in a literal sense. It was very hard to do that, but when I did, then I just felt this release that he loved them so much more, a fierce love. So when we moved there in 2000, in August, 25 years ago, almost to the day, the Second Intifada began 5 weeks later. So buses were blowing up, cars were blowing up, all near home, school, and work. And I had that sense in the midst of that danger that he would take care of Philip, Kathleen, and Grace. And he did. And he's blessed us in the last 25 years with a wonderful bureau team that does amazing work, that's committed to telling the story of Israel from a biblical perspective, from a truthful perspective. And I think that's more important than ever now with all the disinformation. You talk about Balaam. He was meant to curse Israel. Yeah. And we see that right now in the media. We see they're cursing Israel, misinforming about Israel, accusing Israel.
Intentionally lying about it.
Yes, exactly.
And turning truth on its head. Yeah. In your career in Jerusalem, and career is probably the wrong word, in your calling to Jerusalem, or calling from Jerusalem. What was the toughest story you ever did?
October 7th. Yeah, that was the toughest and the most impactful, if I can use that word, for Israel. Just changed their history dramatically. And that's even more impactful than the Second Intifada, than the 2006 Second Lebanon War, than the rise of ISIS and the Arab Spring. It changed things so much. You really, demarcation in biblical history, I think, and certainly history itself. But that was the hardest one, to get to see and hear some of the stories of what happened on that horrific day.
Well, tell me your story. Take us back to that time. When did you first find out?
I first found out Saturday morning, and my wife came in. I was in our office. My wife, Liz, came in and said, "Do you hear those sounds?" And I got up and I thought, well, one of them is probably the Iron Dome hitting, intercepting rockets, and the other was the air raid sirens. And I got up, and we immediately kind of knew something was horribly wrong. And throughout the day, the death toll just kept rising and rising. And we just went live 3 times that day. There was a Saturday, did a couple of the next day, and almost every day since then we've been reporting in some way what's happening. And then got to see Kibbutz Be'eri was the first one I went to. That was just about a week after October 7th. You can still smell the death. It was a war zone.
Yeah, and blood still on the wall.
Exactly. And then we saw many others like you when Kfar Aza, and you just see for yourself what happened. And not only what Hamas terrorists did, but the people that followed them, the second wave of civilians that did as much or more atrocities than the original wave. And it goes back to that ideology where they felt like they were doing God's service by killing, maiming, torturing, and executing Jews.
In the face of this ideology, what should Christians be praying for?
A change of heart for these Hamas and people that follow them, for steadfastness for the Jewish people that have to face this assault in so many different ways and form, whether it's in the media or whether it's a ballistic missile that's coming or a Katyusha rocket, protection for them, the peace of Jerusalem, and that God's purposes will unfold throughout all this, and his divine purposes, and for his return of the Lord.
I've been praying the prayer of Abraham over Ishmael. May Ishmael ever stand before you.
Yeah.
That right now the descendants of Ishmael are clearly far away from God.
Yeah.
And may they ever stand before him.
Yeah.
May they come to themselves and what their true heritage is.
Yeah.
That what they're doing is an absolute abomination.
Yeah. And you've prayed this, I've heard you pray this, that the sons of the prophets will prophesy once again. And I just wanted to say, God bless you for what you've done to stand with Israel since October 7th. That's recognized in Israel. And also your dad, Pat, who made that vow on the Mount of Olives back in the 1970s, that CBN and all its organizations would stand with Israel. He kept that vow. You're keeping that vow. And it makes a difference for such a time as this.
That vow is very close. And yes, we will keep that vow. And you've been keeping it too. Well, Chris, thanks for being with us, and may God bless you as you journey back to Jerusalem and continue your watch.
Thanks.
All right. Israel is under constant threat of war and terror, and yet it consistently ranks in the top 10 of the happiest nations on earth. CBN Films reveals why the Jewish state is largely immune to the social problems that plague many Western societies. Here's a short segment from The Genius of Israel. In March of 2023, the United Nations released its annual World Happiness Report, which ranks each country by its level of happiness. At the top were the usual Scandinavian countries, and one big surprise.
They asked people not actually about happiness, it was about life satisfaction. They asked people to rank their life, to look at their whole life, and to rank it from 0 to 10, how satisfied are you with your life? In Israel, you might think at best would be 50 or 25. Turns out Israel's number 4, up with all the Scandinavian countries.
A year later, after the deadliest terror attack in the country's history, and nearly 6 months of war with Hamas, Israel dropped just one spot to number 5. Compare that to the United States, which plunged from number 15 to number 23 in the same year. Among the world's wealthiest nations, the Jewish state scores high in a variety of areas. At 82.8, Israel has the world's 9th highest life expectancy, 4 years longer than the average American. Israel is also the youngest country, with a median age of 29. That's compared to 38 in the United States, 44 in Europe, and 49 in Japan.
The fact that Israel has such a young population gives again a certain character to the Israeli culture. The fact that you have such a young society means that it's essentially a vote on behalf of the future. When you have 3, 4, 5, 6 or more kids, what you're saying is, I believe in the future.
The country also shows fewer signs of social decay. Israelis have the world's 3rd lowest consumption of alcohol and the lowest rates of so-called deaths of despair, meaning suicide or drug overdose.
We have staggeringly high levels of teen suicide. In the U.S. today, we have a teen suicide epidemic. We have high rates of loneliness. We have high rates of experimentation with or addiction to substances, opioids, other drugs, alcohol. Israel doesn't have any of these problems.
And while loneliness is on the rise in most of the developed world, in Israel it decreased by 20% between 2002 and 2016. In the West, studies have blamed teen depression and suicide on smartphones, social media, or 24/7 access to news and politics. Israeli teenagers are exposed to all of that, plus the reality of joining the army and facing combat when they turn 18. And yet, Israel's teen suicide rates are among the lowest in the world, more than 75% lower than the United States.
Israel doesn't have a loneliness crisis. The data bears it out with Israel's Central Bureau of Statistics. So the question's why?
When the UN's happiness report was released in early 2023, Israel didn't look like the ideal place to be, at least on paper. The country was gripped by anti-government protests, and even before the war with Hamas, the Jewish state lived under the constant threat of terrorism. Economically, the news wasn't much better. In 2023, Israel was one of the world's most expensive places to live. But according to the UN report, it's also one of the most satisfying. So what's their secret? Why are Israelis so happy? Well, you can learn their secret. There's a variety of reasons why Israelis are so happy, but I think the chief one is that God is watching over them. That wonderful word that see what God has done. He's made a light to the nations in restoring the modern state of Israel. I love doing these documentaries about Israel to let people know how did the modern state come to be? How did things evolve, and what were the biographies of all the founders? What really happened in the Six-Day War? But this one, The Genius of Israel, was sparked after October 7th. I read Dan Signor's book, and we've got to do a documentary on this to let the world know, even in the middle of this tragedy, even in the middle of all the horror, all the negative things that are being said at the UN, on the college campuses of Europe and the United States, what's the secret to the genius of Israel? How do they stay so happy? Well, you can watch the rest of this incredible documentary. All you have to do is go to geniusofisraelfilm.com, and for a gift of any dollar amount, you'll receive instant 4K streaming access, and we'll even mail you a DVD copy. So do it now. Go to that wonderful website, geniusofisraelfilm.com, and you can get instant access. Bella survived the Holocaust. Then she suffered the aftershocks of the October 7th massacre. Her grandson was kidnapped and then killed by Hamas terrorists. Bella is a trauma survivor who loves life, and thanks to you, she's receiving healing and hope.
I said it right away. This is the Holocaust. Why do people who endured the Holocaust have to go through the same thing in a country we founded and where we were so happy? How did the Holocaust happen again right in front of our eyes?
Bella Chaim, 86, immigrated to Israel from Poland at a young age after she and her family survived the war. She rebuilt her life in southern Israel. But on October 7th, while Israel came under a brutal attack, Bella's grandson Yotam was kidnapped by Hamas terrorists and was later killed when he tried to escape.
I didn't believe that a thing like this could happen in Israel. I didn't believe after so many years of wars that we stayed through and witnessed the development of one of the most beautiful regions of the country. But all of this, in a matter of hours, it all disappeared.
Bella has found solace at the Neve Eshkol Association for the Elderly, an organization supported by CBN Israel. The center lost 9 people on October 7 and was forced to close for months when the area was declared a military zone. Yulia, one of the directors of the center, knew that reopening as soon as possible would help speed the healing process for both members and staff alike.
We are all in trauma, and it would take a long time to go through that. Being here, opening this place, connecting with the people, this is our way to deal with trauma.
Thanks to you, CBN Israel works with the center to ensure that members receive a hot meal every day, in addition to the support they need, including home visits, various therapies, workshops, tours, and lectures. The staff also receive psychological support in order to be able to help people like Bella.
Yeah, we are here to give people their lives back. We help the elderly people in Eshkol build resilience. This place gives them a reason to keep living and a reason to come back.
Thanks to your help, Neve Eshkol has become a beacon of hope in a war-torn region of Israel, and these traumatized citizens of Israel can begin to find healing.
So appreciate it, and thank you very much for doing all this.
I said to myself, what am I going to do now? And here I find the answer. I go to activities with Michal. I exercise with Laura. I am keeping my brain active. When I come here, I forget everything. I am active, I am busy. We will return. All the people who are refugees in our own country will return. And here in Neve Eshkol, we will hear music again, and we will dance again. I am Bella Chaim. I choose life, and I thank everyone who tells our story, my story, and who helps us get up every morning with a new song. The people of Israel live.
The people of Israel live. We will hear music again. We will dance again. When you hear that kind of hope, you can't help but say, how can I be a part? How can I support the people of Israel? We want to stand with Israel, and we want to be a blessing to Israel. And if you want to participate, whether it's in helping the victims of October 7th, trying to rebuild the Gaza envelope, all the things that CBN Israel is doing with the Israeli Trauma Coalition, the documentaries, the News Bureau, your support makes a world of difference to let them know there are people around the world who are supporting and standing with them. If you'd like to join and become a member of CBN Israel, it's real simple. Pick up a phone, call this special number, 1-800-350-2230, and say, yes, I want to stand with Israel. I want to support. Here's my pledge. Here's my gift. You can also go to the website, cbn.com/support Israel, or you can text to give, text support Israel to 71777. Either way, do it now and realize the great blessing that God promised to Abraham. I will bless those who bless you. So when we stand with Israel, when we're a blessing to Israel, God looks down and says, yes, well, I'm going to bless you too. Here's a word from the book of Joel. Fear not, O land, be glad and rejoice, for the Lord has done great things. Yes, he has. This is a new day for the Middle East, a new day for Israel.